Aisha had never known silence could be so loud. The next morning, she woke up in an unfamiliar bed, in an unfamiliar room, in an unfamiliar life. The bedroom Khalid had assigned her was too grand. High ceilings, a massive four-poster bed, and tall windows that overlooked the gardens below. Everything was decorated in muted golds and creams, elegant yet impersonal, just like the man who owned it. She sat up, her mind still fogged with exhaustion from the wedding and the emotional turmoil of the past few days. The air smelled of fresh jasmine, and the morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the plush carpet. For a brief second, she could almost pretend she was anywhere else. Then reality came crashing back in. She was married to Khalid Al-Mansur. The thought alone made her stomach twist in frustration. A sharp knock on the door shattered the silence. "Come in," she called, though she wasn't sure she wanted company. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman dressed in a crisp black uniform. "Good morning, madam. I'm Layla, the head housekeeper. Mr. Al-Mansur instructed me to see if you needed anything." Aisha forced a polite nod. "No, thank you." Layla hesitated. "Breakfast is served downstairs. Mr. Al-Mansur is waiting." Aisha stiffened. The last thing she wanted was to sit across from him at breakfast, pretending this marriage was normal. Still, she wouldn't cower in her room. If Khalid expected her to play the role of a meek, submissive wife, he would be sorely disappointed. "I'll be down shortly," she said, her voice steady. Layla bowed slightly before leaving. Aisha took her time freshening up, brushing her long dark hair and choosing a simple abaya, not out of modesty but as armor. She needed to feel in control, even if she wasn't. When she finally descended the grand staircase, the scent of freshly baked bread, cardamom coffee, and honey lingered in the air. The dining room was as opulent as the rest of the house, a long mahogany table, chandeliers dripping with crystals, and massive windows that framed the Istanbul skyline. And at the head of the table sat Khalid. He was already dressed for the day in a crisp charcoal suit, effortlessly composed as he sipped his coffee. If he was surprised by her arrival, he didn't show it. "Good morning, wife," he said, setting down his cup. Aisha ignored the way the word made her flinch. "Khalid." He gestured to the seat beside him. "Sit." She considered refusing, but she was already here. With a measured breath, she sat down. For a few moments, there was nothing but the clinking of silverware as the servers placed dishes before them. Labneh drizzled with olive oil, warm pita, fresh fruit, eggs cooked to perfection. Aisha didn't touch any of it. Khalid arched a brow. "Not hungry?" "Not particularly," she said coolly. "You should eat." His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable authority behind it. Asiya lifted her chin. "And if I don't?" His lips curled slightly. "Then I suppose I'll have to watch you starve out of sheer stubbornness." She bristled. "I don't need you to take care of me." His gaze darkened. "That's where you're wrong." The weight of his words settled between them, thick and suffocating. Aisha gripped the edge of the table, refusing to look away. "This arrangement may have been forced upon me," she said, her voice steady, "but don't mistake me for someone who will play the obedient wife." Khalid leaned back, studying her with something akin to amusement. "Noted." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was a battle. After a moment, Khalid turned his attention back to his coffee. "I have a business meeting this morning. You're free to do as you please." She blinked. "I'm free?" He smirked. "Within reason." Aisha let out a dry laugh. "Of course." "How generous of you." He ignored her sarcasm and stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "Leela will assist you if you need anything. Try to make yourself at home, Aisha. You'll be here for a long time." With that, He walked out, leaving her alone with her untouched breakfast. Aisha clenched her fists. This was war, and she had no intention of losing. Chapter 5. Cracks in the ice. Aisha spent the rest of the morning wandering through the mansion, feeling like a trespasser in a life she never wanted. The house was breathtaking, but it lacked warmth. Everything was pristine, too perfect. It was the kind of place that looked more like a museum than a home. She passed through endless corridors adorned with artwork that probably cost more than some people made in a lifetime, yet none of it held any meaning for her. By midday, she found herself in the vast library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled of history. A massive window overlooked the garden, where the sun cast golden rays over neatly trimmed hedges and a marble fountain. She trailed her fingers over the spines of the books, searching for something to distract her from the suffocating weight of her new reality. She pulled out a volume of poetry and settled into one of the oversized chairs. For the first time since the wedding, she allowed herself to relax. But her peace was short-lived. "Didn't take you for a poetry reader," a deep voice drawled. Aisha tensed. She looked up to find Khalid standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her with unreadable eyes. She turned a page without looking at him. "And I didn't take you for the kind of man who interrupts people while they're reading." A smirk tugged at his lips as he stepped inside. "My house. My rules." She resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Of course. How could I forget?" He moved closer, eyeing the book in her hands. "Gibran?" She hesitated, surprised. "You know his work?" His smirk faded slightly. "I read." She scoffed. "I assumed you only read contracts and bank statements." Khalid chuckled, the sound low and rich. "You think very little of me." Aisha snapped the book shut. "I think nothing of you. You don't exist to me beyond this arrangement." His expression darkened, but instead of anger, there was something else in his gaze. Something unreadable. "Then that makes two of us," he said, his voice quieter now. For a fleeting moment, an unfamiliar silence stretched between them. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind they usually shared. It was something different. A crack in the ice. But Aisha refused to acknowledge it. She stood, placing the book back on the shelf. "If you'll excuse me, I'd like to continue not existing in your presence." Without waiting for a reply, she walked past him, her heart pounding for reasons she refused to explore. Khalid let her go, but something told her this wouldn't be the last time their carefully built walls began to crumble. Chapter 6. A Night of Unspoken Truths. The day passed in slow, heavy silence. Aisha avoided Khalid as much as possible, but it was impossible to ignore the way the staff in the mansion watched her with careful politeness. She wasn't just an outsider, she was the new madam, the wife of a man who commanded power with a single glance. She wanted no part of this life, but it had already swallowed her whole. By the time the sun dipped below the Istanbul skyline, casting golden hues over the city, Aisha found herself restless. The walls of the mansion felt too tall, too suffocating. She had never been the type to sit still, to accept her fate quietly. And yet, what could she do? A sharp knock at her bedroom door made her stiffen. She debated ignoring it, but she already knew who it was. With a sigh, she walked over and opened it. Khalid stood there, his sleeves rolled up, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked effortlessly composed, but something about the way he held himself told her he was just as restless as she was. "You're not asleep," he observed. She crossed her arms. "Neither are you." He leaned against the doorway, studying her. "Come with me." Aisha narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "You need air." "And so do I." A part of her wanted to slam the door in his face. Another part of her one she hated was curious. Against her better judgment, She stepped out of the room. Fine. Khalid didn't say anything as he led her down the grand staircase and through a side exit she hadn't noticed before. The warm night air wrapped around her as they stepped onto a private terrace. Below them, the city stretched endlessly, glittering like fallen stars. Aisha inhaled deeply. It had been days since she'd felt fresh air, since she'd felt anything other than frustration and helplessness. Istanbul is beautiful at night, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Khalid leaned against the railing, watching her instead of the view. It is. She ignored the way his gaze lingered on her. Why did you bring me here? He hesitated, then shrugged. Maybe I thought you needed a reminder that the world is bigger than this house. That you're not as trapped as you think. Aisha let out a bitter laugh. I'm your wife because of a business deal. How am I not trapped? Khalid didn't flinch, but there was something in his expression, something almost regretful. I never claimed to be a good man, Aisha. I only do what's necessary. She turned to face him fully, frustration bubbling over. Then tell me, Khalid, what was so necessary about making me your wife? For the first time, he didn't have an immediate answer. The silence stretched between them, heavier than before. But this time, neither of them turned away. Chapter 7. Fractured Lines. Aisha didn't know what answer she expected from Khalid, but the way he stayed silent unnerved her more than any sharp remark could have. She folded her arms, waiting. Well? His jaw tightened, and for the briefest second, something flickered in his dark eyes' hesitation. Guilt? But it was gone just as quickly. You wouldn't understand, he finally said. Aisha scoffed. Try me. Khalid exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. The night breeze tousled the edges of his dark locks, making him look less like the ruthless businessman, and more like a man who carried unseen burdens. You think I did this just to control you? He asked, his voice quieter now. That I married you just to win some twisted power game? Didn't you? She shot back. Khalid didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned away from her, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice was oddly distant. My father built this empire from nothing. But power, once gained, is never safe. Enemies are always watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. He glanced at her. A wife, a respectable wife, ensures stability. It keeps those who would challenge me at bay. You were the perfect choice. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. So I'm a shield. His gaze was steady, unflinching. Yes. The bluntness of it stung more than she expected. At least you're honest, she muttered, looking away. Khalid studied her for a long moment before speaking again. I could have chosen anyone, Aisha. But I chose you. She let out a bitter laugh. And I should be grateful. No, he admitted. But maybe you should stop seeing yourself as a prisoner and start seeing what this could be. She turned to him, eyes flashing. What exactly do you think this could be, Khalid? Some kind of twisted companionship? A marriage of convenience where we play happy husband and wife for the world while resenting each other behind closed doors? His lips pressed into a thin line. It doesn't have to be like that. Then what do you want it to be? For once he had no answer. The air between them grew heavier, thick with words unspoken. The city below shimmered, uncaring of the storm brewing between them. Aisha's heart pounded as she held his gaze. There was something raw in his eyes now, something she didn't understand. She wanted to look away, to break whatever strange pull was forming between them. But she couldn't. And neither could he. Chapter 8. The thin line between hate and something else. The days following their conversation on the terrace were filled with a strained, uneasy truce. Aisha wasn't sure what had shifted between them that night. But something had. Khalid no longer pushed, and she no longer lashed out, at least, not as often. But the silence between them was not peace. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, heavy with all the things left unsaid. One evening, Aisha was in the library again, running her fingers along the spines of the books she had yet to read, when the door creaked open behind her. She knew who it was without turning around. "You always hide here," Khalid remarked, his voice breaking the stillness. She sighed. "It's the only place in this house that feels like it belongs to me." He stepped closer, his presence commanding but not suffocating like before. "Then perhaps I should spend more time here." Aisha turned, narrowing her eyes. "Is that a threat?" He smirked. "Would it make a difference?" She hated how easily he got under her skin, how he always seemed amused by her defiance rather than irritated. "If you're here to bother me, don't waste your time," she said, pulling a book off the shelf. He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the opposite bookshelf, arms crossed. "I have a business dinner tonight. You should come with me." She scoffed. "I don't recall signing up to be your accessory." His expression remained unreadable. "People are beginning to ask questions about you, about us. If you don't show up in public soon, they'll think this marriage is nothing more than a farce." Aisha laughed dryly. "Isn't it?" Khalid exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. "You misunderstand. When people start questioning my position, they look for weakness. If they think my marriage is unstable, they will assume I am vulnerable. And men in my world do not afford the luxury of appearing weak." She studied him carefully, trying to decipher the layers beneath his carefully controlled mask. "So this is about power again." "Everything is about power, Aisha," he murmured. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to her own surprise, she sighed. "Fine, I'll go. But don't expect me to play the doting wife." Khalid's lips curved slightly, a ghost of amusement flickering in his eyes. "I wouldn't dream of it." Something about the way he said it sent an unfamiliar warmth through her chest. She ignored it. This was nothing more than a game of survival, and she refused to forget that. Chapter 9. A Dance with Fire. The grand ballroom was bathed in golden light, chandeliers casting shimmering reflections across the polished marble floors. Laughter and conversation mingled with the soft notes of a classical orchestra, creating an atmosphere of effortless luxury. Aisha stepped inside, her hand resting lightly on Khalid's arm. She had chosen a deep emerald gown that clung to her frame, just enough to be elegant without being revealing. A matching silk hijab framed her face, accentuating the sharpness in her eyes. She looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and power, but she felt like a caged bird, dragged into a performance she wanted no part of. Khalid, as always, was unreadable. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he moved through the crowd with effortless grace, exuding the kind of confidence that made men wary and women intrigued. Aisha hated how easily he commanded a room. "Smile," he murmured, his lips barely moving as they approached a group of high-profile guests. "They're watching." She forced a polite curve to her lips, but her fingers dug into his arm slightly in silent protest. "Ah, Khalid," a sharp, older voice cut through the air. "Finally decided to introduce your wife to the world." Aisha turned to find a man in his late 50s studying her with a knowing smirk. She recognized him instantly, Adnan Sheikh, a business mogul whose name had been whispered in every high society gathering since she was a child. He was one of Khalid's biggest competitors, a man with no shortage of influence. Khalid's expression didn't change. "Adnan, I figured it was time my wife met the people who think they know everything about my life." Adnan chuckled, swirling his glass. Clever as always. His gaze flickered to Aisha, assessing her. "And what do you think of your husband, Mrs.?" Aisha held his stare, refusing to be intimidated. "I think he's a man who doesn't like being questioned." There was a beat of silence, and then Adnan laughed, clearly delighted. sharp tongue. I like that. Khalid's hand on her waist tightened ever so slightly. A silent warning. I wouldn't push your luck, Adnan, Khalid said, his voice deceptively smooth. My wife isn't one to be charmed by men like you. Adnan grinned, amused. A pity. Adnan soon wandered off to greet someone else. Aisha exhaled, only now realizing how tense she had been. You handled that well, Khalid murmured, his breath warm against her temple. She turned slightly, looking up at him. I don't need you to tell me that. His lips quirked. Of course not. But it doesn't mean I won't. You're tense, he murmured, his lips just a breath away from her ear. She forced herself to relax. Maybe because I don't like being put on display. His thumb brushed over the back of her hand, then stopped seeing it as a performance. She met his gaze, her heart hammering in her chest. There was something dangerous about the way he looked at her, something that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the first time she realized how thin the line between hatred and something else truly was. Chapter 10. A fire that cannot be contained. The dance ended, but the fire it ignited between them did not. Aisha felt her pulse in her throat as Khalid led her off the dance floor, his grip lingering a second too long. She told herself it was the heat of the moment, the pressure of the watching crowd, the facade they had to maintain. That deep down, she knew better. Khalid was dangerous, not just in the way he conducted business, but in the way he made her feel things she had no right to feel. As soon as they were out of the public eye, she pulled her hand away and took a step back. That was quite the performance. His lips twitched, but his eyes remained dark and unreadable. Was it? She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Enjoyed what? She scoffed. Playing with me like I'm just another move in your game. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. And what if you are? Her breath caught. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled, thick with tension. His gaze flickered to her lips before returning to her eyes, and she hated the way her stomach twisted at the silent implication. She forced herself to stand tall. I won't let you win, Khalid. His smirk was slow, predatory. Aisha, you still don't understand, do you? She frowned. Understand what? He leaned in, his voice a low murmur. This isn't a game I intend to win. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Then what is it? His fingers brushed against hers, just for a second, just enough to make her breath hitch. A fire, Aisha. His voice was dangerously soft. One neither of us knows how to put out. She swallowed hard, unable to look away. This was a battle she had never prepared for, and she wasn't sure she wanted to win. She met his gaze, her heart hammering in her chest. There was something dangerous about the way he looked at her, something that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the first time she realized how thin the line between hatred and something else truly was. Chapter 10. A fire that cannot be contained. The conversation ended, but the fire it ignited between them did not. Aisha felt her pulse in her throat as Khalid continued to lead her, his grip lingering a second too long. She told herself it was the heat of the moment, the pressure of the watching crowd, the facade they had to maintain. But deep down, she knew better. Khalid was dangerous, not just in the way he conducted business, but in the way he made her feel things she had no right to feel. As soon as they were out of the public eye, She pulled her hand away and took a step back. That was quite the performance. His lips twitched, but his eyes remained dark and unreadable. Was it? She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Enjoyed what? She scoffed. Playing with me like I'm just another move in your game. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. And what if you are? Her breath caught. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled, thick with tension. His gaze flickered to her lips before returning to her eyes, and she hated the way her stomach twisted at the silent implication. She forced herself to stand tall. I won't let you win, Khalid. His smirk was slow, predatory. Aisha, you still don't understand, do you? She frowned. Understand what? He leaned in, his voice a low murmur. This isn't a game I intend to win. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Then what is it? His fingers brushed against hers, just for a second, just enough to make her breath hitch. A fire, Aisha. His voice was dangerously soft. One neither of us knows how to put out. She swallowed hard, unable to look away. This was a battle she had never prepared for, and she wasn't sure she wanted to win. Chapter 11. When the walls begin to crumble. Aisha barely slept that night. Even as she lay in her separate bedroom, staring at the ceiling, she could still feel the phantom touch of Khalid's fingers against hers, the weight of his words lingering in the air like smoke from an unextinguished flame. A fire, Aisha. One neither of us knows how to put out. She squeezed her eyes shut. No. She refused to let herself be drawn into whatever this was. She had spent too long resenting him, too long fighting to keep her heart untouched. If she let herself feel anything now, it would be a betrayal to herself, to the anger she had nurtured like armor. But what if that anger was starting to crack? A soft knock at her door startled her out of her thoughts. She sat up, heart pounding. Who else would it be at this hour? Yes? The door opened and Khalid stepped inside. He wasn't in his usual suit, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His posture slightly less rigid than usual. If she didn't know better, she would almost think he looked hesitant. She wrapped her arms around herself. What do you want? He shut the door behind him but didn't move closer. You didn't eat at the gala. She blinked. What? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You barely touched your food. You do that when you're upset. Aisha swallowed. He had noticed. I wasn't upset, she lied. I just wasn't hungry. Khalid didn't look convinced. Are you hungry now? She hesitated. The answer was yes, but admitting that meant acknowledging the concern in his voice, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. Still, her stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl, and Khalid's lips twitched in amusement. Come, he said. I had something brought up to the sitting room. Aisha should have refused. She should have told him to leave, that she didn't need him looking after her. But something about the way he stood there less. The ruthless businessman and more, a man trying to bridge an invisible gap, made her get out of bed. Without a word, she followed him. In the small sitting room adjacent to their bedrooms, a low table had been set with an assortment of dishes. It wasn't grand or elaborate. Just simple comfort food, lentil soup, warm bread, a plate of gates. The kind of meal that reminded her of home. A lump formed in her throat. You didn't have to do this, she said softly. Khalid poured her a cup of tea, his expression unreadable. I know. She sat down, and for the first time since their marriage began, they ate together without pretense, without walls. And Aisha wondered if maybe, just maybe, the fire wasn't something to fear after all.